Well, hello everybody, and welcome to episode number 25 of Cardboard Time. This is Arwen, and this episode is going to be a little bit out of the ordinary. There will be absolutely no reviews today. I'm recording this just as I get back from Origins, and it has been a long weekend. You can probably tell from my voice, I'm still recovering a little bit. Plenty of talking to some really fantastic people, and I can't wait to tell you all about it, but unfortunately, I had like one day to get this up, so poor planning on my part. Probably should have done a little bit more prep work. We do plan on having a special later this week to talk about it with Jamie, who went with me, but today we do have a fantastic interview with Jim Freeman and James Staley talking about Hamsters versus Hippos and a lot of really cool stuff. So let's get right into this episode and let's get into the content that you want to hear. Today's beer of the day is the Furnace Hazy Pale Ale by Barley's Brewing Company in Columbus, Ohio, and this was very appropriate for Origins. Arcane Wonders actually partnered with them to have a beer with the name, which is a lot of fun, and it sounds like the owner of Barley's is a bit of a board game nerd himself. As far as the beer goes, it was more complex than I was expecting. Definitely some grapefruit with a nice malty finish. There were some other notes in there which I couldn't really readily identify, but it was really solid. I gave it a 4, and it was kind of on the border of a 4.25 out of 5. Just didn't quite hit there, but wow, was that good. I could have easily gone for another one if I didn't have a whole bunch of stuff to do later that day. And we will check the Shelf of Shame. That's a little preview for what's coming up on the special so that you'll get to know what I purchased and what I got played. And my Shelf of Shame was down to 150 at one point, and then the vendor hall of Origins opened up. And, that racked that. The Shelf of Shame is at 157. It is up to from the last podcast. So really not as bad as I was kind of worried that it was going to be, but it definitely didn't go down. There weren't a whole lot of opportunities to play a lot of games for me. We were doing a lot of networking, but we did get some played. So we'll talk about that in a minute. 11 new additions to the Shelf of Shame since we last talked. It's been a little bit. The Gallerist was the first one. Got a lot of games. My favorite game store in the area had a little sale, and I decided that that was a great time to get a Lacerda game into my collection, and I am incredibly glad that I did. Next is basically my Origins haul. 10 games from that. The first one being Furnace, a really hot game. Lots of people picking that one up, and that was pretty much front and center. Great display by Arcane Wonders. Really excited about that one. I love engine building, and this sounds like a very nice engine builder. I received a review copy of Lawyer Up from Rock Manor Games. Excited to get that one to the table. Sounds very interesting. The Belgian Beers Race is a game that I thought about kickstarting and didn't quite get around to it. And I did finally pick up a copy at the convention. I figure anybody that listens to this podcast for an extended period of time knows my love for beer, knows my love for Belgian beers, and this seemed like a no-brainer. I kind of had to have it. I received a review copy of Gladius from Deepwater Games, a wonderful booth. Really good folks over there as well. So looking forward to getting that out. Jamie reviewed the rules, and she said that it shouldn't be too hard to get to the table. So expect a review shortly. Too Many Bones is finally in my collection, and this one from Chip Theory Games, I sat down, did a demo with their fantastic staff, and there was no way that I could leave Origins without a copy of it. So I've been eyeing it for the past 3 years or so. I've really been interested in it, never sat down for a demo, but the quality was obviously there, just a little bit of a pretty high price point, but for the components that you get, definitely a investment. Really eager to get this one out to the table and start playing that. The Rocks was next, and this one has been lighting social media up. Looks like a cross between Azul and Potion Explosion, 2 games that I absolutely adore, and this adds a cocktail themes. Floor Plan was also another acquisition. I played this on Thursday night of Origins and decided that I had to pick it up. Nice little roll and write game. Kohaku was a game that I missed out on the deluxe edition of with the acrylic tiles, but kind of had some regrets about not getting it. Looks like it's going to be an absolutely beautiful game, and heard a lot of really good things about the gameplay as well. So excited to have that in the collection. I got a copy of Borderlands Tiny Tina's Robot Tea Party. So try saying that 3 times fast. A review copy from XYZ Games, so look forward to that content coming. And finally, Knights of the Hound Table, a small little company produced this out of Syracuse, and we played a sample round. Really liked the people that were there, so we picked this one up. A very light, straightforward card game. So those were my new additions. Let's talk about what I played, and there's actually quite a difference between my additions and my played count this week. So the first game up was Ramen Fury. I joined some friends once again at Milestone, and we got this one out, which was a lot of fun. A very simple card game, a lot of take that, but we really enjoyed that. Crossmaster Arena, I got out on Board Game Arena with Justin, and we'll save the discussion for him. The Gallerist, so I talked about that being new to my collection, and we will absolutely be circling back to this one at some point once I have an opportunity to play with others. I played it solo, but really for my first Lacerda, I was not disappointed, and it's leaving the door open to many more in my future. I was absolutely smitten and intrigued by this game, so you don't have to wait for my opinion. It's not leaving the shelf anytime soon, but as far as nuanced review goes, you're going to have to wait a little bit longer. On Wednesday night of Origins, I decided to go down super early and get a hotel. There were some events that were going on, very small, unofficial events, but I thought I might as well take the day, enjoy some of Columbus, and get a couple things to the table. I got Pendulum and XCOM, the board game, out, and they were both solo games, and I enjoyed both more than I was expecting. Pendulum has been kind of one of those games that had mixed reviews on Board Game Geek. I actually enjoyed the gameplay quite a bit. I played the solo mode, which you have to play timed. And I think a lot of people that had a lot of big gripes with it were playing the untimed mode. I think this game absolutely needs to be played timed. That's the whole point of the game. It was a very interesting mechanic to add in there. And then XCOM, the board game, was a very interesting experience as well. Very well developed app, especially considering the time that it was developed in. Next, I played The Expanse with Jamie. And I also played Arcana and Seven Summits. And then finally, like I said before, I played Floor Plan as well at the convention. So those were my played games. And we will talk about some of them on a future podcast, but today's not that day. And then finally, the expansions that I got. These don't count because they're expansions, so they're not on the shelf of shame. Onitama Light and Shadow, like I said, I had to have this one, and I picked this one up. I'm an Onitama fiend. I absolutely love it. this needed to come home. Manufactions for Fantastic Factories. Everybody knows my love for Fantastic Factories. 100% needed this expansion. Looking through it and seeing the different factions and the different asymmetric starting resources, really intrigued to play Fantastic Factories with this. And I also picked up the playmat because I was at the Deepwater booth. I saw it and I said, this could get out solo enough. I think the playmat would be a good investment. And then when I picked up Too Many Bones, I picked up a couple of extra characters. Tink was one because they basically build robots, and that sounds really cool, attacking your enemies with a bunch of robots and not actually getting into combat yourself. And then, of course, I had to pick up Nugget, because that is my chinchilla's name. That was like a no-brainer pickup. And then finally, at the Origins flea market that was coordinated through Board Game Geek, I picked up Cursed Mountain for In the Hall of the Mountain King, which adds cooperative play and solo play, and I loved In the Hall of the Mountain King. Unfortunately, haven't had the chance to do the official review with Phil yet, but we both really enjoyed the game, and to be able to make it cooperative and maybe get it out with some different friends, or just play it solo myself, I think is a great idea. And I picked this one up for about $5, which I thought was a really good deal. Sold some games while I was down there as well. So got a couple of things out of the house, but definitely added a lot more. So anyways, that was the Shelf of Shame. We will once again be getting a little bit more into the Origins discussion a little bit later in the week when we get the bonus episode out for you. Well, stay tuned because we have a wonderful interview with Jim Freeman and James Staley, so you will not want to miss this. Stay tuned. Okay, so at this time, I'd like to welcome James Freeman and James Staley to the show. They are co-designers of Hamsters vs. Hippos. James Freeman is also a social media specialist, and James Staley is the host of Board Game Binge, and also the owner of Tin Robot Games. Gentlemen, welcome to Cardboard Time.
Oh, thanks for having us. I appreciate it.
Not a problem. So the first thing that we want to know is definitely a little bit more about Hamsters versus Hippos.
Sure. Well, Hamsters versus Hippos, it's funny when people hear that, they're like, what? How do hamsters and hippos kind of interact? And that's kind of the general idea behind that is we've taken this kind of twisted kind of idea that James had and put it into a game. So Hamsters vs. Hippos, it's a light 2 to 6 player game of tile flipping, lotus flower gathering, and avoiding being eaten by hippos. The story behind this is that you're these hamsters they're at the zoo, you're in your enclosure, and one day somebody leaves the latch of the cage unlocked. So you make a run for it, right? You want to get to Hamsterland, and of course Hamsterland is in Canada, where I'm from. A little side note there. And as you're racing out of the zoo, you see the pond that you've been looking at outside the window for the past couple years, and of course these lotus flowers are all over the pond. And in Hamsterland, lotus flowers are like gold, right? So you want to go and collect as many of those as you can, so you can live like a king or queen when you get to Hamsterland. Now, unfortunately, this pond is also where the zoo keeps the hippos, right? And the hippos just happen to have a favorite snack, and that is hamsters. So that's kind of this scenario, this kind of weird scenario that we set up as a theme around the game. But the core of the game itself gets down to it's a push your luck style of tile flipping, seeing how many flowers you can gather and decide, when is the right time to leave the pond. Are you going to leave, gather more and take a chance of getting eaten, or do you leave when the getting's good?
Oh, that's certainly a very, very interesting and different theme. What was your inspiration behind developing the game?
I'll throw that one over to James.
Yeah, so when I started out in the game industry, I think everybody has a phase where they try to design a game. So like me and my friend went on the site that had random board game name generators, and we just tried to find the weirdest thing we could find. And that wound up being this game that I made called Grim Reaper Hippopotamus, which at the time I thought was decent, but it really wasn't complete. Like it was still lacking some things, and I play tested it with friends and family and they liked it, but it just felt like it was missing something, so I shelved it for a while. And then through working at Doomlings, I met James, and me and James started talking about games, and I showed him Grim Reaper Hippopotamus, and he liked the fundamental core of the game but wanted to expand it, and we pitched ideas back and forth, and that became this game.
What really got me is that kind of the whole idea of this Grim Reaper hippopotamus. I just found it hilarious, that you've got this image of this hippo that's kind of just lurking, ready to get you. But we wanted to find a way to kind of soften it a bit. So the Grim Reaper felt a little too ominous, right, in the original version. So the one thing that, we asked James, said, do you mind if we make some edits to this? And, James, of course, is like, do whatever you want, because that's the kind of guy he is. He's just a great guy. So we said, okay. And at first we actually thought, well, what if it was bunnies? Bunnies and hippopotamuses would be kind of funny. The idea of these kind of ears kind of hanging out of the hippo's mouth. And then that kind of slowly evolved into this idea of, okay, what's another small creature that could be a good name for this? And then we had the double alliteration of, hamsters and hippos. So it turned into basically hamsters versus hippos. But the thing that I really liked about the game was this kind of discovery, but I want to take it one step further and say, okay, can we turn this into kind of like a push your luck, but not just a push your luck where you're just seeing how far you can go, but something where you're actually interacting with the board. So you're moving your piece, across this pond like it's like you're the actual hamster itself, jumping from lily pad to lily pad. So, as James says, after a successive kind of back and forth, we kind of landed at where we currently, the current iteration.
I have to say that I'm a huge fan of Press Your Luck games. A couple of my favorites are Can't Stop, and Quacks at Quedlinburg is one of my absolute favorite games of all time. How was this different or similar to the other Press Your Luck games that are currently on the market?
I think the main difference is a lot of, like, when you talk about Can't Stop, it's a race, right? Or when you're playing Ink and Gold, everything is based on everybody making a decision on one card. And in this game, you have the ability to try to, say, find the hippos. If you're in the lead and you want to try to wreck someone's game, you have that element that generally isn't available in a Press Your Luck game.
Yeah, it's got a tiny bit of take that in there for sure. There's also the ability to cut people off in the pond, right? Because you can only go on to tiles that have not been flipped. So like you can't go back to where someone's already been. And so that gives us a dynamic where as you're going through the pond, if some of the tiles actually have lotus flowers on top of them as well. So you're trying to, as you're flipping these tiles, you're discovering different actions, and under some of these tiles, there's actually lotus flowers you can collect. But in the initial setup, there's 9 lotus flowers in the center of the board on top of tiles you automatically get just by stepping on that tile. So you actually have the ability where you can cut somebody off by flipping tiles and kind of cutting their path off so that you've got greater access to those as well. So I think, that's a good point. I think that's something that's a little bit different than you're seeing in some of these other push your luck games.
Yeah, that definitely sounds different. And is there a suggested age range for this game? Is it pretty much open to everybody, or is it for heavier gamers or lighter gamers?
Yeah, let me take that one. So with this game, on the box, you'll see this as 14 plus, and there's a very specific reason for that. And that is that it contains small parts. And I used to work in the food industry, and specifically in hot dogs. So the company I worked with, we actually sold hot dogs. And one thing they always would say to people is, hey, when you cook a hot dog, you're feeding to kids, make sure you cut lengthwise down so that, it doesn't block the airway and it's not choke size. Because there's small round tokens in this game, it's important that people are, there's adult supervision if you are playing with kids, but we've seen people play this with kids as young as 6, all the way up to full grown adults. I know in my gaming group, there's some people that are lighter gamers, like they're not super heavy. They just kind of see it more as a socialization, like let's sit around chatting, drinking coffee. Oh, and by the way, we've got a game that we're kind of playing and interacting with. So those kind of people love the game like this because it's lighter. It's not super heavy in strategy. There's a lot of randomness to it, but you do have some control as well. So it seems to be something that fits a lot of people. With my company, one thing that we try to do, and the reason why I really like this game that James had, was we're constantly looking for games that are in the casual board game segment, right? So games that could be considered like gateway games, for instance. So something you're going to bring out at the beginning of game night, or maybe you're going to bring it out at the end of game night when you're just kind of wrapping it up and there's a few people kind of still hanging around. But that's what this game is about, right? And, for people looking for games like that, I think it's a perfect fit.
There's definitely an area of the market that a lot of people who are really heavier board gamers that are looking to get friends and family into the hobby, this seems like a kind of gateway into some of those other games.
Yeah, and I think that as part of that, the one thing we really wanted to do was focus on the quality of the components, right? So specifically for people who do have a large game collection that maybe are getting it so they can introduce other people into the hobby, whether it be younger kids or even friends and family members. We wanted them, when they open up, that it's a showpiece, right? And I know that, I mean, here in Canada, we've had a lot of lockdowns for the past couple of years, so we haven't had the same opportunity to go to like the meetup groups and the game nights that I used to go to. But in each of those nights, the one thing I'd always notice is if there was a game that was a bit of a showpiece, right? Where there's like some components that look really nice and really premium, had really nice artwork, people would often crowd around and say, "What is that? Can I maybe play in the next round?" So for us, that's something that, James and I really wanted to make sure was core to this game, that it's not just a quick press your luck game, but it's really a showpiece. So, the tiles are 2.5-inch tiles, radius corners, linen finish on both sides of the tiles so that they don't scuff easy. They're thick enough so that you can pick them up and flip them over easy. You're not trying to kind of pick at, anybody knows you're trying to pick up a card off a table. Sometimes you're munching the edges of those cards trying to get your nail under it. Well, we want something thick enough you can actually pick it up and flip it over easily. So we want some kind of like robustness to the game. The lotus flower tokens are wooden, right? So they're nice cutout wooden tokens. We didn't want to go with punch outs. The meeples are absolutely adorable. We've got these little hamster meeples. There's 6 of them and they're screen printed. We included the resource bowl because I know myself, I get annoyed when I have a game with a lot of components and there's a general supply and it's just in a heap in the middle of the table, right? So we want to have something where, okay, where do we put those tokens? Let's put them off the side so you can keep them nice and contained. The insert in the box keeps everything nice and organized. Now that is something that we're probably going to, when we get to the final iteration, because we only have reviewer copies right now, but when this campaign's done, we're probably going to move to a plastic insert on that one just to give it that much more protection in the box. And then we got player boards, and the player boards, they didn't have to be as thick on the table because you're not picking them up and flipping them over and so forth, but we still want them to be high quality. So they're linen finish as well with radius corners. So really, it's all about quality for this one. Quality, especially for our Kickstarter backers.
Well, I think we're going to segment a little bit into more the development of the game right now. And we've talked to other designers in the past about their experiences designing and playtesting during COVID. So how has that affected how you've been working on this game? Have you been doing things more virtually or in person?
It's definitely been a challenge. Traditionally, I've used Tabletop Simulator for playtesting, which we've used on this game as well. We've used, as we said, like meetup groups and so forth, which we've had less access to. So what we've done is we've really relied heavily on a lot of collaboration between the two of us. And quite frankly, I think COVID has probably brought this game to market faster than it normally would. It definitely brought James and I together in our discussions, and I think it brought him and I closer together a lot in our collaboration, but certainly he's down in his area testing this game a lot with, again, his extended network. He can actually get to more people even than I can because things are a little bit more open in the States. But here in Canada, certainly the same thing. All of our playtesting iteration was done with friends and extended family.
No, it's really been interesting hearing about people, especially at the beginning of COVID. They were like, oh, we've got to do all this stuff for playtesting and that, and I hate doing it online, and I want to do it in person. And then you talk to the same people later, and it's like, nah, this online stuff is actually pretty good. I can do this and this and this and this. And it's like, I thought you hated it.
Well, there's certainly 2 things coming out of that. One is that I think it's opened up people at Tabletop Simulator that maybe were not using that in the past. And I know that the iterative process is way, way faster with Tabletop Simulator, because if you need to change a card, you can literally just upload the card and bang, you're back into playtesting with updated artwork or, maybe components or mechanics. Whereas in the past, you'd have to go back down to the print shop, reprint it off, cut it out and so forth. So I think it's definitely sped up that iterative development process. And then secondly, I think it's giving you access to people around the world that maybe you wouldn't have even considered doing as part of a playtest group. I know Joe Slack, for instance, he hosts a playtesting group once a month on Sundays virtually through Discord. Discord, and it's open to anybody that wants to come in and play test their game. There's people in that group literally from all corners of the planet, and it's just a really, really cool thing to see. And I don't know if that would have happened. Maybe eventually it would have happened, but I don't think it would have happened as fast as it did because of COVID.
I think it was interesting because I personally work better when I work off of somebody. Like to me, designing isn't a singular thing, because what I found when I tried to develop games earlier is that it's your baby, right? Like you think you're doing the best things, and you really need honest reviewers or play testers, and you need somebody else to bounce off ideas off of. James is just great for me for that, because we're always like, well, what about this? What about this? And not necessarily everything gets implemented, but it gets me thinking in different directions. And these relationships were formed because of the pandemic, of, just communicating through emails and then doing Zoom chats. And I'm super grateful for that.
Yeah, it was great to network with you, James. There's no doubt. I'm glad that that we connected, and lifelong buds now, which I think is awesome. When I look at this game, I think that's a good point, because the specific example I can think of is when, for the longest time, we had it that if you revealed one hippo, that basically stopped it for everybody, right? So everybody in the pond that was still in the pond after Hippos flipped were dead. And through the play testing we found, and a lot of the blind play testing, quite frankly, is people were coming back saying, hey, you got a massive buzzkill here where you set up the board, and then the first tile somebody flips is the hippo. And then that round's over and we got to shuffle and reset up. And that's what led us to this idea of, okay, if somebody still can step on a hippo on their first flip, and that person's out of the round, but everyone else can keep going, right? So it's only when a second hippo's flipped that you start seeing that game, that round end for everybody else, and then you do your reset. The one thing I want to add is that the danger keeps getting stronger and stronger each successive round, because you keep adding more hippos to the pond. And part of the unknowing in this game is when you shuffle the deck up, there's a 52 tiles in this deck, and in the third and fourth round you got 4 hippos in there. So on a 5x5 grid, there's a possibility that there's no hippos in that pond, right? And that's the part that kind of plays with your head a little bit, is that, you're going along, you're like, oh, I don't know, I think I'm going to jump out because I don't want to flip a hippo. And lo and behold, you check the cards afterwards and there wasn't even any hippos in the pond.
I really like that. I think that's pretty awesome. You've got a lot of games that you wind up, no matter what, you've got danger in there. Yeah. So like Quacks of Quedlinburg, that, hey, I've got these fizz bombs that are in my bag, and at some point I'm going to pull them. But that's a really, really interesting take. I really like that.
Yeah, it's cool. It's cool. I like this idea too of, for me, and again, I got 2 kids that, when they play a game and they start battling, and if there's any kind of take that, it gets ugly real fast. For me, the balance, and this is one thing that James and I worked really hard on, is how do we have a little bit of take that in there, but just a smidge. So not enough that there's going to be a lot of sour feelings, but enough that it adds some interest and some variability to the game.
So any other interesting stories that you guys have from the development of the game?
Well, I think one is that when we first started this off, getting to know James, he's an awesome guy. He really is. And, he's got this quirky personality. And I wanted to have that in the game, in the artwork, as much as we possibly could. But I think we probably went a little bridge too far out of the gate, where we had the scenario, when you read the scenario, is, okay, Pablo Escobar's, has finally been caught, and now they open up the gates of the zoo and let all the animals go, and you're trying to escape Colombia, and it's like, this might be getting a little too dark. So we had to pull the reins a little bit back, and I'm glad we did, but it definitely, we had a lot of laughs over that. In sourcing some of the components, I had a pretty good chuckle with when we were sourcing that resource bowl. We said to the manufacturer, hey, can you send us, I want to see some samples, right? Can you send me some samples of, the resource bowl? It's got to hold the tokens. But I didn't send them the size. I just said, send us like a resource bowl. I sent them a picture, kind of like you'd have in Century Spice or something like that. So like a week and a half later, this package arrives at my door, and it's a small little package. I'm like, did they only send like one bowl? This is very strange. So I open up the package, and the bowl size is like a Kinder Egg size. Like you'd have like in a Kinder Egg. Like it can hold like 2 tokens. I was like, what is this? But it's one of these cases where it matched the picture, but unfortunately it was like 1/10 the size it was supposed to be. So it's kind of a funny lesson that, when you're dealing with, especially manufacturers on the other side of the planet, you got to be very prescriptive as to what you're looking for, not just photos, but measurements. And on the flip side, not just measurements, but make sure you include photos and things like that. So we learn with every game that we do. And for us, that was a huge learning as well.
For those of us in the States where Kinder eggs are illegal, it's about the size of a plastic Easter egg.
Are you saying Kinder eggs are illegal in the States? This is a learning for me.
Yeah. They recently released a thing called Kinder, I think it's Kinder Joy.
Yep, that's Kinder Joy.
Yeah, and correct me if I'm wrong, James, but the toy in the American ones is on the outside of the package.
Yeah, it's like weirdly packaged separately, I think.
Yeah, it's bizarre. Like there was some sort of beef with the government and Kinder. Like they just said that the toys were like a choking hazard for kids, and they made them illegal. And there's like a huge fine for importing them. I wound up running a couple over the border. Don't tell anybody.
My thought is, I wonder if they would have put the 14 plus on the outside of the Kinder egg, if it would have been okay, like we did with the game. Like, sorry, you have to be 14 plus to buy this Kinder egg.
You must be over 14 to enjoy this product that's designed specifically for children.
I did not know that. You learn something new every day. I don't know where I'm going to put this factoid in my brain, but I'm glad that I'm now more knowledgeable than I was 10 minutes ago.
We're always educational here on Cardboard Time. So tell us a little bit more about Tin Robot Games and some of the other games that you've published.
Yeah, absolutely. So Tin Robot Games, we're a relatively young company. I'd say we're about 3 years old. I started off with our first Kickstarter, Tanks But No Thanks, which is a tank skirmish game that plays 2 to 4 players. The follow-up to that was Queen of Scots, the card game. That was based on a game that was in my family literally for 100 years. My grandmother, she played it when she was a kid, and we reskinned it to fit the theme of the battle between Mary Queen of Scots and Queen Elizabeth I and all the characters around that story. Rack Up is another card game we have that is part of that. And then we kind of worked towards Nutty Squirrels of the Oakwood Forest, which is our last campaign that did very, very well, and we'll be fulfilling very shortly. I believe those games go on the water next week. So we'll be fulfilling those in about 6 weeks. But the core of our company is really, I like all sorts of games, but we really want to focus on casual gateway type games. So that's our wheelhouse. So any game that we create has to be explained in less than 5 minutes. You have to be able to set up in less than 5 minutes, and the playtime has to be under an hour. If there's a game out there that either we create, or in this case where we sign somebody like James and partner with them, if it fits that kind of wheelhouse, then we're all ears, and we're excited to see if we can bring it to market. We don't just focus on Kickstarters. We do have a couple games that are going straight to retail. One is called Dirty Dragsters, which will be coming out this Christmas season here in Canada, maybe in the States as well. And it's a very simple war type style card game where you're basically mixing your each person picks how much of their gas tank they want to put in each heat. You mix them together and you deal them out, and based on how the different cards play is how these cards basically move down the track. Very simple, but fun game for kids to play in the schoolyard, or if you're playing with maybe your grandparents or people who are non-gamers.
And how has the shipping situation impacted you guys? Well, we all know negatively.
Yeah, that's just a long sigh. It's interesting. So Nutty Squirrels, everything was on track with that game. And I had a lot of people reach out to me saying, hey, we're seeing a lot of things online about shipping rates, and is it impacting your game? And at the time, everything we were hearing was, no, we're still on track. Everything's good. But it did slow us down, not a lot, maybe by about a week, but the cost was double. Mm-hmm. Double. So, and these are, and not just like shipping to like the backers. This is like the containers coming from the manufacturer to the different distribution centers around the world. That cost has literally doubled, right? And so in our campaign, we had accommodated roughly about a 50% increase in the shipping costs, and it is significantly higher than that. So we end up eating that. I had two choices. I could have went back to our backers and said, hey, our shipping costs came in higher than we intended. Can we get more money? But that's not really our style, right? So we plan a lot before we do our campaigns. We want to make sure we're really buttoned down. We have everything costed out properly. All the shipping, everything's planned before we even launch our campaign. So for us, it was something that we were able to manage, and we make a little bit less money, and that's okay. For me, it's more important about the backers having a good game, and then the extra inventory we have left over, we can put that out at retail. Yeah, shipping's been crazy. It is probably that and VAT tax are the two things that have been the biggest disruptors in this industry as of late. The VAT tax, we were lucky. We saw that coming, so we accommodated that going into this campaign. But I know, several publishers that their campaigns literally finished funding and then all this happened like right afterwards. And in those cases, you're kind of cooked, right? Because your costs of getting into Europe just went up by 20%. And if you didn't collect the funds from your backers, either eating that or you're going back to the well. And it's never fun going back to the well. It is never fun going back to the well. So if you can try to pad it enough to accommodate those things, then you should be okay.
It's been interesting seeing other publishers' reactions to it. Some people, actually, the most that I've seen is basically publishers eating it and saying, we acknowledge that it's there, but we are not going to come back to you and ask for more money. I've seen a couple of come back to the well. Like you're saying, when those shipping costs essentially double, I've heard estimates somewhere there were a couple of instances that was over 500% increase from what they were quoted. That's tough to eat. I mean, that's really, really tough to eat. Double is tough to eat. And then some publishers have actually gone back and said, hey, we're going to do a hybrid kind of thing where we'll give you a few promo cards if you send us some money that we'll put towards shipping. So
yeah, I've seen that too. Yeah.
Really interesting to see the response.
Yeah, and I think we're coming to the back end of that. And so we're in kind of that in-between hot mess situation, right? But we're coming to the back end of it. And I think most campaigns going forward should be way cleaner for most publishers. And, we've been fortunate. And, I think that comes down to planning. And, for me, that's the part I geek out over in the business just as much as the game design side is the business side. For me, I want to make sure everything is buttoned down. I'm shocked, quite frankly, when I talk to a publisher, and I have talked to some even on our podcast where they're like, I say, well, where are you going to manufacture this, or who are you using to distribute this? And their answer is, well, after we're finished our closer campaign, we're going to go figure that out over the next year. And it's like, what? Like, how do you not have those answers going into your campaign? Like, there's so many unknowns. We're fairly buttoned down, but there's still always an unknown that'll pop up during the campaign, right? So, things can get very costly, and you're kind of gambling with other people's money. So you got to take that seriously, right? And I think in respect to the backers, you got to do everything you possibly can to make sure you're going to deliver on what you promised.
It's a crazy, crazy situation, and that's even more interesting that's happening. That's something that I didn't even know. That's crazy.
It's typically for people coming in for the first time. Like anybody who's published the game before usually will get that button down. But yeah, it blows me away. It blows me away when I hear that response. But all you can do is provide advice, and usually my advice is button all that down before you launch. It will help you sleep better at night. Trust me.
So besides Hamsters versus Hippos, what other games are on your guys' table lately?
So in my house, the main games that get played for my family are Love Letter, Azul, and King Domino. Those are the games I can pretty much guarantee that everybody will go, okay, I'll play that. And then I play a lot of things solo. So I play Warp's Edge. There's a game by Phil Singer Games called Champions of the Galaxy. It's like an RPG-styled wrestling game that I play. I have a whole shelf of solo stuff, and every once in a while when I have time, I'll pull something out. And again, the same concept with the Tin Robot games. I want to play something that I can set up, play, and then put away. Like I don't have time for a game that takes me an hour to set up. Like sometimes I'll use Board Game Arena for things, but mostly I want something with a quick setup that I can just play and enjoy and then be done.
For me, I try as many new games as I possibly can. And the one area that I've really missed on these meetups is I used to use that as an opportunity to try something new literally every week because, at the meetup, everybody bring a different game. But lately, what I've been doing is I've been actually going and buying some of these games that I would be playing at the meetups that other people would bring. So, for instance, Dominion is currently on our table. Parade, the card game, I don't know if anybody knows that game, but it's a fun game. Like James, King Domino, I love it. That game I've only been typically playing on Board Game Arena in a digital format, but I finally got a physical copy to play. Some newer ones like Chai. So at the Kazmaiers, they launched a Chai game. Finally got my copy, deluxe edition. Awesome game. I love it. We've been playing that a lot. Camel Up. And I just want to make mention of one thing that James said there about the solo thing, because we didn't really highlight that too much on Hamsters versus Hippos, but there is a separate solo mode with this game. And one thing we wanted to make sure when we create solo modes of our games is to not just create like an automa deck or just have it as an add-on, but have it as something that is thought out from the beginning. And in this case, we create a solo mode using the same components, some of the same mechanics, but it's more of a puzzle. So you're actually using 4 hamsters at one time. And as you move them across the board, there's certain rules like no hamsters can ever be on 2 adjacent tiles and things like that. So you got to try, and you can never move the same hamster more than once. So like a puzzle, you're trying to find a way to navigate this pawn, press your luck, but at the same time, you've got these constraints that force it into kind of this really thinky kind of puzzle mode, which I really love. For me, Cristallo was probably from Liberty Kiefer. She's got this awesome game, Cristallo. And that's a little bit the inspiration behind the solo version of our game, is saying, okay, how can we have it in a way that's puzzly, it's thinky, and then you're trying to hit objectives. So it's not just, okay, get the highest score you can, but really what kind of objectives can you hit? And what the ultimate objective is getting to Hamsterland, right? So you can beat the game, and there's some cases you can actually completely lose the game, but there's kind of how do I get out? Can I get out of the zoo, right? Okay, now can I make it to the border? Okay, now I'm going to try and make it to Hamsterland. So you got these different objectives, with the higher level being obviously getting to Hamsterland.
Awesome. Well, anything else that you guys have to discuss?
No. I don't know. No. James, anything else, James?
No, I'm good.
Yeah, I just want to thank you, Arwen, for having us on the podcast. I think that one thing I really love about this industry, and again, I'll just reiterate, I'm rather new into the industry, although Thanks But No Thanks is something that we made, 25 years ago, but then kind of parked it. And I think there's a lot of people out there that are probably in a similar situation where maybe they tinkered with games or came up with their own game ideas when they're younger, and they've, put them in a closet somewhere to collect dust, right? And they've gone on with their lives and assume that the board game industry was dead. But this whole indie side of the industry with Kickstarter and crowdfunding and so forth has created so much variety that I am sure that somebody's got a game in their closet somewhere that is collecting dust, that they should pull it out, dust it off, and say, hey, is this something I can launch? Or maybe I can, tweak it a bit to modernize it a bit. But there's a lot of gems out there, and I hope people will take a chance. You don't have to go, big. You can go small. You can go on the Game Crafter and, make a prototype on the Game Crafter and sell it through the Game Crafter, literally one copy at a time. You don't have to go that big, but if it's a passion of yours, you should definitely pursue it, because, man, it is so rewarding to be able to see other people play something that you've created.
And there's also a huge community, too, that's there to support that development as well. I never really knew about that when I started in the hobby, and then kind of delving more into it, it's wild the amount of people who are just out there playtesting, giving feedback, trying to mentor young designers. It's wild, just the amount of community support that's out there for that. So that's a really good point.
Yeah, to echo that, I think, too, is that you have people that love board games. You don't have to be a designer to get into the industry. There are so many different things you can do. As you said, you can playtest. People are always looking for volunteers to playtest their games. If that's something you love to do, try new games. Reach out to publishers and say, hey, I love playing games and I'd love to play test your game. Do you want to hook me up with a tabletop simulator version? Or if you got like a rough sample, I'd love to try it. Go to like some of these prototype nights, like Protospiel and so forth, and try other people's games. Maybe you're an artist. Maybe you're just really good at doing art. Well, there's often people looking for artists for their games. Maybe you're good at social media, like James the Wizard that's on this podcast with us, and that could be your contribution. There's so many different things. Literally anything that you could do, there's got to be an application in the board game industry. You just got to find it. But there's so many people looking for people to help that there's something there for anybody if you just look for it.
Well, perfect. I want to thank both of you guys for being on the show. The most important thing absolutely is where and when to find Hamsters versus Hippos.
Oh, perfect. So Hamsters versus Hippos hits Kickstarter on October 20th. If people want to sign up, we would love to have you follow the campaign. Even if you don't sign up, just to follow the campaign. If you go to tinrobotgames.com, so tinrobotgames.com, you can sign up to our newsletter and we'll send you a notification when we go live. If you'd prefer just to go to the Kickstarter notification link, you can do that as well just by going to hamstersversushippos.com. So it's hamsters and then vshippos.com. If you want to follow us on any of our social media channels, it's at tinrobotgames. And if you want to check out our podcast, it's the Board Game Binge Podcast, which you can find anywhere you download your favorite podcast.
Well, again, thank you guys so much for being on the podcast. We really appreciate it. Well, I think that is going to do it for us today. Please make sure to check out our website at cardboardtime.com. Instagram and Twitter is at cardboard_time. If you have any questions, suggestions, or ideas for discussion topics, please email cardboardtime@gmail.com. And as always, thanks again for listening, and we'll see you in another 2 weeks for another episode of Cardboard Time.